Are you growing a podcast as content marketing in the hope you'll be turning listeners into leads? Louise Archer launched Retrained Search, the podcast, around a year ago with her co-host Jordan. And since then, they've taken the podcast from a few dozen listeners to hundreds. They've built a branded podcast that gets them qualified leads to their business every single month. And in this episode, we cover creating a branded podcast with personality, getting the best out of your audio setup, finding a process and rhythm that works for you, how Louise's podcast brings in new leads regularly, and Louise gives insight into the feedback she's gotten from listeners of why they listen to each episode. If you want to grow a podcast alongside your brand, this episode is for you. Hi Louise, thanks for joining me on Podcasting Amplified. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Joe. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So Louise Archer joins me. She has a podcast called Retrained Search, the podcast, and it's all about what's going on in the world of retrained search, from LinkedIn controversies to sharing success stories. So the podcast is called Retrained Search. Your business is also called Retrained Search. You started about a year ago, is that right?
Probably not quite, maybe 6 months. Yeah. I mean, I can't remember actually when we did the first one. You probably know because you probably looked. It doesn't feel like that long.
Yeah, I'm just looking on Spotify. July 2023, the pilot.
Oh my God, right. It has been a year then.
Gone fast.
It's flown by. It is really flown by. It doesn't feel like that. I still feel like an amateur.
So have you been producing episodes bi-weekly, every other week?
Yes, every other week we've been doing it. We were guided actually by a new team member who came from somewhere that had been doing a podcast that was successful, and she suggested the bi-weekly rhythm.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, it's easier to keep on top of things and stay consistent with two a month, obviously, more so than
I think
week.
Once a week is too often, isn't it? And once a month isn't often enough, it seems. And every other week has been manageable from a time perspective, but not too frequently that you don't have enough to talk about or are struggling for content.
Yeah, and
if you only do them once a month, it feels a bit disjointed, I think.
Yeah, it's hard to keep your listeners sort of keeping your podcast at top of mind. And so what made you decide to, I know you said you had somebody who guided you. What made you decide a year ago, this is the kind of content we want to make and this is right for the business to start a podcast? We'd
been doing like online like masterclasses and sessions that were free and people could attend, and we'd give a load of value and teach some people stuff, and then at the end just saying like, well, stick around and if anyone wants to chat or ask any questions. And the feedback that we were getting was that the lessons that we were teaching were massively helpful, but the value, there was as much if not more value in the conversation that then took place afterwards. And so we kind of wanted to give a forum to that, really, the stuff that just comes up that people want to know. And because retained is a subject that a lot of it's done kind of behind closed doors, and people aren't always very open to sharing their techniques and how they do it and what works and what doesn't. And a lot of people don't know that. So it was lifting the lid on that, the kind of the nuts and bolts of then the nitty gritty and the highs and the lows of what people wanted to see. And Jordan, who co-hosts it with me, and our sales director, is very funny and makes me laugh a lot. So it's easy when you've got a co-host like Jordan because it's fun. And that made me think all of those things. And Kirsty, who had done some podcast work before, said it's a really good thing to do, and she thought it would go down really well, and she had the experience to be able to say, here's how frequently we should do it, this is the rhythm, these are the kind of topics that we should start with, this is we kind of experimented with it, but when she really said yes, let's put some emphasis on it, then that was when we really decided to go all out.
Yeah. And have you seen any kind of measurable results over the last year in a way that's helped your business?
Yeah. Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. Like, I don't know how many people come on. We probably should measure how many people actually come to us and end up talking to us about what we do as a result of listening to the podcast. But it's at least 1 or 2 a week now.
Wow.
And even we have messages, or we'll get an email from someone saying, "Oh, I listened to your podcast and I want a retainer." And that in itself is, impact and results straight away for people. But then they'll say, I'm saving up to do your course, and then they'll join the course, and then they'll win another retainer and say, I listened to the podcast, I want a retainer on my own, then I join the course, and now I'm winning them consistently. And the story, like the journey that is helping people to go on, is hugely impactful for our audience and our listeners, as well as for us and our business. Yeah, it's made a really positive impact on everybody.
Cool. Yeah, it's good to hear such a positive success story after a year, because I know it seems like a year to some people, but it can take at least a year or even 2 to start getting any kind of results. And if you're getting a couple of leads a week, that's really good.
Yeah. It is really good. Like Jordan was stopped in David Lloyd the other day by somebody that said, "Are you Jordan Taylor?" And he thought that they knew him from the tennis court because he plays in the team. "Yeah, I play on the men's team." No, I listened to your podcast. And he was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it." Who ended up booking some time with us and is now a customer of ours.
Wow.
So yeah, for us, it's been a really good thing to do, and we'll continue to do it.
Nice. And yeah, it's obviously like very intrinsically linked to the business. I'm guessing like the listener, the ideal listener is the same as basically your ideal customer as well for Retrained Search.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that makes me interested. Like when you asked me, you're interested in the name of the podcast is the same as the name of the business. We just weren't very creative with the name of the podcast. Do you think we should change the name of it? Should it be something different?
I think the fact that it's clearly understandable what it's about, it's fine. Like, for example, my business name is a made-up word, and like it did cross my mind, like the Claricast podcast or something, but it just doesn't mean enough. So it didn't really work. So obviously it went with Podcasting Amplified. And
yes, I see what you mean.
So Retrained Search, like it's already clear what it is and kind of a clever name, and then it's not like you're sort of hiding behind the brand as well. I think that's another issue some podcasts end up with. Like they'll call their podcast the brand name, and you won't see the host name in the author section on the cover art, anything like that. And that's not very attractive to listeners if it's just a brand, but you've got your faces on the cover art, and it's co-hosted, and people can get to know you and your personalities and that.
Oh, cool. Okay. Any tips for improvement? Like you know this stuff.
Which are there certain areas that you're struggling with, or that you have struggled with in the last year?
Well, I'll tell you what, we've been on a bit of a journey with it, because we started off using Riverside, and because everyone was sort of saying that's what you need to use, a high quality recording thing, and it was really hard work. We've really struggled with it. Yeah. Like the buffering, I'm out in the sticks and my internet isn't as strong as people that live in civilized areas. And that really caused a problem with the pace of the recording and the download speed. And you just couldn't have a flowing conversation because it was so much buffering. So then we ended up just switching back to Zoom, and it's been brilliant. I mean, I noticed that the link we're using today is a Zoom link. So you're the guy that knows, and we've found the same thing, that actually Zoom does a pretty good job. But that was painful for a while and was a bit frustrating, because we were kind of convinced that we had to make that work and we just couldn't make it work. Is there anything else we're struggling with? No, I don't think so. No, but I'm always open to like what, from an outsider, what we can be doing better if there's something obvious that you think should be changed.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is a big challenge that a lot of podcasters have, the tech side of things, and we can talk about that. Like Riverside, yeah, you're going to get a better quality recording out of it, but it does really tend to lag at points because it's constantly uploading from both sides that high quality audio and video. So you get a good quality result at the end, but it can, if you have a bad signal, it can make the conversation difficult. With Zoom, there are settings that you can use, like I've got original sound for musicians turned on and making sure I'm recording to 2 tracks, so that helps. But I'm also recording locally onto my computer, so the recording that I'll actually use for the final episode isn't the Zoom recording, not on my side anyway. It's that direct recording to my computer, which would be maximum quality. So it's a bit difficult when you're interviewing non-podcaster guests, because they're not going to probably know how to do that on their side. And also they probably don't have professional microphones. So I know for me, I'm lucky because I'm recording with podcasters, but I know it might be difficult for you with some guests.
Yeah.
Although we mentioned you interviewed Hisham from the Recruitment Mentors podcast, and he obviously has a pretty good setup. So
he does. Yeah, he does. And that's largely down to you, I would imagine.
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of it's just to do with the mic as well. Like if you get the right mic and position it correctly, that makes a big difference. Yes,
I'm always being told that it should be in front of me, like that.
Is it?
I think it looks strange.
Blue Yeti, or what kind of mic is it?
Yeah, it's a Blue Yeti.
Yeah, and this is probably hopefully helpful to people listening as well. Like the Blue Yeti is really popular because it's so easy to use and it picks up, like wherever you put it, it's going to pick you up. The thing is, because of that, it's also really sensitive, so it picks up quite a lot of the echo and stuff around the room. So with mics like that, I normally suggest to people try and get it as close to your mouth as possible, like how mine is on the screen. So it's like pointing directly at my mouth.
Strange, I think.
And
it always looks a bit odd, doesn't it, when you on the
you don't
video?
have to worry about it now, but
you know, I always have to remember that not many people actually watch the video. I mean, have you got any statistics on that? How many people actually watch the visual of the recording versus how many people just listen to the sound?
Yeah, it really depends, because I already had a YouTube following, nothing crazy, but there were people subscribed before I launched a podcast myself. So the YouTube episodes actually get like double the views or listens than the audio only version.
Oh, really?
But regardless, I think people are too worried about the microphone on the camera, to be honest, and they're going to be more concerned with if it sounds good. So if you can get one of these, and I know Jordan mentioned that he was trying to avoid doing this, but if you can get one of these arms or a stand and get it right in front, pointing like just 4 to 6 inches or so from your mouth, and get one of those foam balls on top, you can get that more kind of radio style, kind of warm recording, if you know what I mean, and it avoids all
like
the echo from the
yours sounds good.
Yeah, well, this is a dynamic mic, which it's a lot. They're less sensitive than a Blue Yeti condenser style. So you've really got to get them quite close. But if you're not recording in a recording studio, then it makes it easier. But yeah, again, like the Blue Yeti is fine. It's just that you've got to get it pretty close to avoid that kind of echoey-ness you get.
Okay, thanks. I have to get myself an arm.
Yeah. But, you know, the most important thing is sort of getting started, and like people can hear you clearly. So, but yeah, if you want to kind of start leveling things up, there are things you can do that might not really cost anything, but could make a big difference.
Cool.
But yeah, so going more towards your experiences, has there been any particular episode that's really stood out to you that you've particularly enjoyed, or like have you sort of gradually fallen into it a bit more and gotten more comfortable with the interviews?
Yeah, I'd definitely say that it was less relaxed to begin with and more rigid of what's our agenda, what should we be talking about now, what should we move on to next. And now we know the flow of what we do. We don't have to worry about that so much. And knowing that people are listening and they're finding it not just useful, but implementable and funny and enjoyable to listen to, I've definitely relaxed a lot more. And I know Jordan has as well, which I think in turn just continues to make it better because we're, enjoying it. I think the best episodes for me are either when I haven't seen Jordan for a couple of weeks and we haven't really spoken, because that's the only time we're kind of catching up. And I don't know what he's been doing for the last 2 weeks in terms of helping people win retainers, what problems he's been facing, what he's been overcoming, and what's going on. And so when he tells me stuff, I'm like, oh, no way, what did you do about that? And that's pretty cool. And to capture that, exactly, as it's happening is nice. And the same for him. He doesn't know what I've been doing in my mastermind group, and he learns stuff from what we do and vice versa. So those are some of the best ones for me when, we haven't seen each other for ages. And then the other is when we have guests on that are really interesting and again, we haven't spoken to for a while, people like Greg Samidian, and we had Sarah Chester, our digital expert, on the other day, and you're just listening to them talking, thinking, oh my God, that's so good. Dave Wolstenholme, and they end up just saying stuff naturally that you think, God, I'd never have thought of that. And you learn, you don't expect to learn stuff being well, maybe you do, but it's as helpful to you as a host as it is probably to the audience, and as interesting. And I've just found it more and more enjoyable the more that I do of them, really. And we've started to get more creative about, that person would make a really good guest. If I'm interested in listening to them and what they've got to say and their approach and what's working for them, I think, bloody hell, well, our audience would love that. Let's bring them on and see what happens. And so that was my thing. It was nerve-wracking to start with and a bit stilted. And the first few episodes, I'm sure, are dreadful. I dread to think what they were like. I think we had like 12 people listening, but we were over the moon because 12 people were listening. And what kind of audiences do you see, Joe? Like what's a sort of small, medium, and wider audience?
Oh, now you're testing me. The figures kind of change all the time. I know that at one point recently, one of the stats, maybe from the podcasthost.com or something, said 1,000 downloads for an episode in the first 7 days is like top 5% or top 10% of podcasts. But then it drops quite quickly. So if in the top 50% of podcasts, you're looking at like 100 downloads for an episode. So you don't have, it's not like YouTube where people are listening just for a short amount or watching for a short amount of time on average. And with podcasts, they tend to stick around more. So a podcast download tends to be more valuable than a YouTube view. But it is hard to sort of know what a good amount of downloads is, because it's all about your business outcomes, really. Like for you, 1 to 2 leads per week. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So that's the metric.
I mean, whether
really.
they actually, the difficult thing to measure for us, and we talk about this in our like marketing meetings, is it doesn't necessarily start with the podcast and finish with the podcast, but it's often a part of what the journey that they go on. So they might have seen an ad that we've put out, and then they'll Google it, and then the podcast will come up, and then they'll listen to so you can't necessarily attribute the podcast to the whole lead, and I wouldn't want to stop the other things that we're doing and say, oh, well, all we need is, the podcast. All that can, put more effort into that, and that will generate everything we need, because I see it being just a part of it that plays a role in the customer then deciding that they want to talk to us or find out more. But I mean, I certainly see a person a week at least hear them say, oh, I was listening to your podcast, and I think, oh, great, cool. What I probably should do is that the reason that we're talking today?
Yeah.
And Jordan says the same thing. So on average, sometimes it's a bit more, sometimes it's maybe not as many, but certainly we're each having a person a week mentioning it and saying that they've listened to it and that they liked it, and that's why they want to talk to us. So
yeah, and then
that matters, doesn't it? The size of the audience, like you say, I suppose doesn't really matter. But I was just curious, really. I have no idea how many downloads we have. I'm not, technologically capable to set that stuff up or look at it. And luckily I've got a great team that are. But I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, those figures that I mentioned are roughly what you tend to see. It depends on the platform. But yeah, and it's hard to tell, even the ones that have listened to your podcast and say they came from the podcast. That might not have been the first thing they saw of you. It might have been some other content on LinkedIn, and then they connected with you, and then eventually they might have found you without the podcast. So it is kind of hard to tell, but as long as you can see that it's doing something, and if the numbers are going in the right direction, then that's the important thing as well.
Yeah.
How did you grow the podcast then? Because I'm guessing you had some support from in-house marketing, and you've got your own audiences on LinkedIn you can leverage. Was there anything else that you used to make the podcast grow?
That's a good question. We do quite a lot on LinkedIn, as you probably noticed. So we definitely promoted it organically. I don't think we did any paid advertising around the podcast, but I know that we'd started to build a bit of a YouTube following, and were sharing like 2 videos a week regularly on YouTube at the time that we launched the podcast. So then sharing the podcast episodes to that audience, I think, was the first bit of traction that we started to get. We also have quite sophisticated email marketing campaigns, and we're sharing it out through those like warm and cold outreach campaigns, not in a pushy way, but in a you might want to, it's new, let us know what you think way. I don't know whether we did anything else. I think those were the main things that we did originally. We did it. We did promote it at the end of the webinars as well, because they were quite popular. They still are quite popular. And so at the end of every webinar, we were saying, we're going to put a link to the podcast. Make sure you sign up, have a listen, then you'll get the new episodes. And we promoted it internally because obviously we have like a membership and a community. So we promoted it there as well, which we haven't done for a while, actually. We probably should. Maybe Kirsty already does. But yeah, we have an internal marketing team. Sarah heads that up, and Kirsty and Charlie they're all wonderful and look after the production of it, the promotion, the producing of it, and the guests, and lining them up and prepping them. And really, Jordan and I are lucky enough just to turn up at the right time and have a laugh.
What about for yourself? So we've talked a lot about the business. Are there any kind of sort of benefits or skills that has helped you grow, like any kind of personal benefits from podcasting?
I think it gives you confidence, weirdly. When you're sharing stuff that is going on in your day-to-day world, I mean, yes, of course, what challenges I'm helping people overcome in the mastermind group, and how they're winning bigger and more complex pieces of work, and some of the highs and the lows and the intricacies of all that. But also when you're sharing, which does come up when you're podcasting, right? Because it's a longer form conversation, what's going on in your personal life, and what you've been up to for the last couple of weeks since you saw each other, which comes up with Jordan and I. And people, the feedback from that is it's funny and it's interesting and it's informative. I think you grow in confidence as a person about sharing that kind of stuff and start enjoying. You enjoy, I'm quite open anyway, but you start to really enjoy sharing that with an audience, and know that they're kind of with you. And I don't know, I'll speak to people on the sales calls, and they'll say, oh, how are you getting on with, Emily and her driving? And I'm like, how do you know that? Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Cause you know me. And it does help you grow as an entrepreneur and as a small business owner. Your life is kind of inextricably linked, as you probably know, Joe, with your business anyway. Yeah. I think working in this way and sharing with an audience in that way, it really does enable you to be very human, and authentic's overused, but to be who you really are, and to get that feedback to say, yeah, this is cool, and we like listening to this stuff, just enables you to be more you, and relax and enjoy that. And that's cool. That's really cool. And it's the same for Jordan. I think he wouldn't mind me speaking for him and saying that I think he has the same experience with it, and he's definitely grown in confidence as a professional, sharing what he's doing behind the scenes, but also as a human and what goes on in his life, and being relaxed about that, him just being who he was. I remember when we did the first episode, he's like, what should I wear? I've got like a smart t-shirt and stuff, or polo, and I just be you. And now he doesn't even think about it. We'll just do it, and he'll have a hoodie on, or I'll have just come back from walking the dog, and we just are who we are. And that's a nice piece of growth.
Yeah, that authenticity. Like, I need to find another synonym for that, because I know what you mean. It seems to be overused these days, but the podcasts that I've seen that grow the fastest are the ones where the hosts are just being themselves, and the listeners can feel like they're in the room, part of the gang. So you're obviously sort of
exactly
leaning down that route, despite the fact that it is a branded podcast. You've got that personality in there, which is good. Yeah,
well, that's what makes it fun. I'd hate to have to take a deep breath and put a mask on for it and be a professional, be somebody that I'm not for it. It just wouldn't be enjoyable, and I don't think it would be enjoyable to listen to. If people didn't like us for us and what we're really doing and who we really are, then probably don't want to work with us anyway. That's fine.
Yeah, and the getting positive feedback helps, like you say, as well. They don't stick out as much though as the negative feedback, I find, and that's something I've worked on over the years. Like on a YouTube video, you'll put it out and 95% of the comments are all like really positive, and then you get one that someone has a problem with your hair or something, and then that's the one that I keep in my mind for half the day. But have you got any like specific feedback about the podcast, whether it's good or bad, but like, I like this aspect of it, or can you do this differently or whatever?
What have we had? Yeah, I do sometimes ask, what do you like about it? And people say they like it. So they say that it's funny, that it makes them laugh. They say they like that. And that is all credit to Jordan. He's the one that makes everyone laugh. And they say it's helpful, like it helps them to win retainers. And that's why they're interested in listening to it in the first place. So it does what they wanted it to do. So having specific feedback, like the emails saying, I've just did what you said on the podcast and won a project, is great. In the early days, we had feedback that the sound wasn't good enough.
Okay.
Which was why we invested in the mics, because to begin with, we didn't even do that.
Yeah. Well, that's good to get some
And that was helpful.
honest feedback.
I think somebody said the length is good, like, because normally it's like we'll kind of get to it, and by 35, 40 minutes, we're like, right, cool.
Yeah.
That's everything I've got for this week, rather than, it being
Dragging
a set
on.
hour that we're trying to fill.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Cool.
So we'll just let it flow, and some are kind of 25 minutes, some are 40, 45, because we've got down a route and it's massively interesting and we're in it, and then we're like, oh, right, okay, that one's a bit longer, but that's okay.
One more question.
That's most of it. Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Of course not.
Is there anything, and you've mentioned the audio, is there anything else that you wish you'd known when you started about the podcasting process that would have made things easier?
Yeah, I mean, I wish we hadn't bothered with Riverside. I wish we'd just used Zoom straight away.
Yeah.
I'm glad that a couple of people told us that we needed to do it properly and we needed to get a setup here and, cameras positioned and mics positioned and invite guests face to face if we really wanted to be taken seriously. And I'm grateful that we took the other advice, which was, you don't need to do that. And actually, you can both be sat in different parts of the country and just having a conversation over Zoom, and it be just as interesting and fun and funny.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's down the line, but I'm grateful that the team encouraged us to, done is better than perfect. And that was the route that we went down. And I'm glad that we did do that. But I wish we hadn't bothered with Riverside, and I wish we'd just gone straight to Zoom.
Yeah, make it easy.
Yeah, almost put us off completely.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, like I said, like Riverside, I do recommend it. Like, we recommend it to clients, but if it's just not working for you, then there are other ways of doing things, and your tools should never get in the way of you continuing with the podcast. So, like you say, if it was that frustrating and if it was causing that many problems, then obviously not worth it. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. And it might just be unique because I'm, out in the sticks and Starlink's good, but it wasn't quite good enough. It wasn't quite good enough for it. So I'm sure if you've got a fibre connection, then it probably isn't a problem.
Yeah, just finding a process that works for you.
Well,
but
thank you.
So people
Thank you
can
very
find
much.
you on LinkedIn at Louise Archer, and Retrained Search the podcast on Spotify and everywhere else you can get your podcasts.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere else
That's it.
for people to connect with you?
I'm all over LinkedIn. Love to connect to new people. Always open to chatting to people. So, just drop me a note if you want to have a conversation about any of it. And I'm really grateful for you inviting me on, Joe, and anyone that's thinking of podcasting. Like I just say, it's been a great experience for us, and I highly, highly recommend it.
Awesome. Thanks, Louise.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Podcasting Amplified. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow or subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. We'll be back next time with another conversation offering more insights to take your podcast to the next level and help you to achieve success. Happy podcasting.